American political discourse has become an increasingly toxic brand over recent years. Now, has Donald Trump helped increase this toxicity and made the situation worse by, in brackets, inciting violence, with recent wording such like destruction on destruction, and recently saying guns on guns is a remedy for that poor hapless synagogue that was taken apart last week by a lone wolf, causing multiple deaths? And secondarily, Jacob, would you briefly comment on how you could help ameliorate America's gun culture in order to reduce repeated mass killings of the nature that they suffer in an almost conveyor belt type way these days?
Stay on the line. A couple of issues for you there, Mr. Rees-Mogg.
Well, I think on the second question, for me to ameliorate the problem of American gun culture is outside my remit. I could give some thoughts on how I would do it, but the American political system is very different from ours. And it's worth bearing in mind that the amendment to the US Constitution that maintains the right to bear arms is directly lifted from our Bill of Rights. Our Bill of Rights maintains the right to bear arms for the maintenance of a Protestant militia, which from my point of view as a Catholic, it's reassuring that this right has been limited in subsequent years. But the point on language is, I think, the fundamental one, Ian. And I believe in conducting political discourse in broadly moderate language. That's not to say that on some occasions it's worth using a pithy phrase to highlight something, but by and large political discourse should be even-tempered and well-mannered. It is perfectly possible to disagree with people politely, and that's how democracy ought to work. American political culture has always been, regardless of Donald Trump, much more aggressive than the UK's political culture.
Why do you suppose that is?
Well, it may be to do with the frontier nature of the United States. It may be to do with its history. It may be to do with the First Amendment, freedom of speech. So it's much easier to say things in America, and adverts on radio and television in the US are very punchy compared to ours, which are more cautious. Though, when you look at what our political debate was like in the 19th century and quite how rude Disraeli was willing to be, he called Gladstone a shoplifter. I mean, he really didn't mince his words at all. Ours has developed into a more polite conversation in comparison with the US, and I think that's beneficial for our politics. But Donald Trump operates in the political atmosphere in which he operates.
So has he fueled hate and hate incidents, whether it be hate speech or the worst scale possible attacks on synagogues?
I think it's wrong to blame Donald Trump for murderous people who go into synagogues and commit wicked acts. I don't think there's any direct or indirect link to what he has said. I think that's much more to do with America's gun culture. And you've got to understand, to go to the second part of the question, the difficulty for America is that they're starting from where they're starting from, where there are so many guns in the country, and that if you were simply to make it illegal for the law-abiding, you probably don't do anything about the non-law-abiding because of the quantities that are there.
He took 4 guns into the synagogue. It's quite extraordinary.
It is terrible.
And lastly, the suggestion is that now they might be looking at posting men or women with guns on the doors of synagogues.
Yes. And as
a man of faith, admittedly I know you're a Catholic, that must just make your heart sink.
Well, it is desperately sad, but as I understand it, a lot of synagogues in the UK have security, not armed security, but unarmed security, and we should be very worried about that we shouldn't always just point the finger at the US, we should sometimes think about what is wrong within our own society. Ian